وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار، في من تمن عليه وادخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم رب شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن وافترضت على عبادك فيه الصيام، صل على محمد وآل محمد وارزقني حج بيتك الحرام في عامي هذا وفي كل عام، واغفر لي تلك الذنوب العظام، فإنه لا يغفرها غيرك يا رحمن يا علام. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقض يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يده، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما، إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير مع حاجة إلي به عظيما، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي وصفحك عن ظلمي وسترك على قبيح عملي وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي، أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقني من رحمتك وأريتني من قدرتك وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مذلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك، فإن أبطأ عني عتبت بجهلي عليك. ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور، فلم أرى مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب. إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودع إلي فلا أقبل منك. كأن لي التطول عليك، فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك، إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول آناته في غضبه وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح، ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزته الأعزى وتواضع لعظمته العظماء، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يحيي، الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أناديه، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا أعصيه، ويعظم النعمة علي فلا أجازيه. فكم من موهبة هنية قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يفتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد سائله، ولا يخيب عامله. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبين الظالمين، مدرك الهاربين نكال الظالمين، صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين، معتمد المؤمنين. الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها، وترجف الأرض وعمارها، وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا، وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولا يخلق، ويرزق ولا يرزق، ويطعم ولا يطعم، ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسمى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأهل الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم صل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي. حجك على عبادك وأمائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم صل على ولي قائم المؤمن والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك. استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله. مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له. أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه واعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا وما قصرنا عنه فبلغنا. اللهم ألمم به شعثنا واشعب به صدعنا وارتق به فتقنا وكثر به قلتنا وأعزز به ذلتنا وأغن به عائلنا وأقضي به عن مغرمنا واجبره فقرنا وسدد به خلتنا ويسر به عسرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وانجح به طلبتنا وأنجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا وأعطنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا وأعطنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين اشف به صدورنا واذهب به غيظ قلوبنا وأهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وقلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتظاهر الزمان علينا صل على محمد وآله وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجله وبنصر تكشفه ونصر تعزه وسلطان حق تظهره ورحمة منك تجللناها وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم برحمتك في الصالحين فادخلنا وفي عليين فارفعنا وبكأس من معين من عين سلسبيل فاسقنا ومن الحور العين برحمتك فزوجنا ومن الولدان المخلدين كأنهم لؤلؤ مكنون فاخدمنا ومن ثمار الجنة ولحوم الطير فأطعمنا ومن ثياب السندس والحرير والاستبرق فألبسنا وليلة القدر وحج بيتك الحرام وقتلين في سبيلك فوفق لنا وصالح الدعاء والمسألة فاستجب لنا وإذا جمعت الأولين والآخرين يوم القيامة فارحمنا وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا وبراءة من النار فاكتب لنا وفي جهنم فلا تغلنا وفي عذابك وهوانك فلا تبتلنا ومن الزقوم والضريع فلا تطعمنا ومع الشياطين فلا تجعلنا وفي النار على وجوهنا فلا تكببنا ومن ثياب النار وسرابيل القطران فلا تلبسنا ومن كل سوء يا لا إله إلا أنت بحق لا إله إلا أنت فنجنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم إني أسألك أن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر من الأمر المحتوم في الأمر الحكيم من القضاء الذي لا يرد ولا يبدل أن تكتبني من حجاج بيتك الحرام المبرور حجهم المشكور سعيهم المغفور ذنوبهم المكفر عنهم سيئاتهم وأن تجعل فيما تقضي وتقدر أن تطيل عمري في خير وعافية وتوسع في رزقي وتجعلني ممن تنتصر به لدينك ولا تستبدل بي غيري. أعوذ بجلال وجهك الكريم أن ينقضي عني شهر رمضان أو يطلع الفجر من ليلتي هذا ولك في قبلي تبعة أو ذنب تعذبني عليه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا ذا الذي كان قبل كل شيء ثم خلق كل شيء ثم يبقى ويفنى كل شيء. يا ذا الذي ليس كمثله شيء ويا ذا الذي ليس في السماوات العلى ولا في الأراضين السفلى ولا فوقهن ولا تحتهن ولا بينهن إله يعبد غيره. لك الحمد حمدا لا يقوى على إحصائه إلا أنت. وصل على محمد وآل محمد صلاة لا يقوى على إحصائها إلا أنت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إلهي وقف السائلون ببابك ولاذ الفقراء بجانبك ووقفت سفينة المساكين على ساحل بحرك بحر جودك وكرمك يرجون الجواز إلى ساحة رحمتك ونعمتك. إلهي إن كنت لا تغفر في هذا الشهر الشريف إلا لمن أخلص لك في صيامه وقيامه فمن للمذنب المقصر إذا غرق في بحر ذنوبه وآثامه. إلهي إن كنت لا ترحم إلا المطيعين فمن للعاصين. وإن كنت لا تقبل إلا من العاملين فمن للمقصرين. إلهي ربح الصائمون وفاز القائمون ونجا المخلصون ونحن عبيدك المذنبون. فارحمنا برحمتك واعتقنا من النار بعفوك يا كريم يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم أدخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم أغني كل فقير. اللهم أشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكسو كل عريان. اللهم اقضي دين كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل أسير. اللهم اصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشفي كل مريض. اللهم اشفي كل مريض. اللهم اشفي كل مريض. اللهم سد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر إنك أنت على كل شيء قدير. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. سورة الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سبحانك يا الله، تعاليت يا رحمن، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا رحيم، تعاليت يا كريم، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا ملك، تعاليت يا مالك، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا قدوس، تعاليت يا سلام، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا مؤمن، تعاليت يا مهيمن، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا عزيز، تعاليت يا جبار، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا متكبر، تعاليت يا متجبر، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا خالق، تعاليت يا بارئ، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا مصور، تعاليت يا مقدر، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا هادي، تعاليت يا باقي، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا وهاب، تعاليت يا تواب، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا فتاح، تعاليت يا مرتاح، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا سيدي، تعاليت يا مولاي، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا قريب، تعاليت يا رقيب، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا مبدئ، تعاليت يا معيد، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا حميد، تعاليت يا مجيد، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا قديم، تعاليت يا عظيم، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا غفور، تعاليت يا شكور، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا شاهد، تعاليت يا شهيد، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا حنان، تعاليت يا منان، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا باعث، تعاليت يا وارث، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا محيي، تعاليت يا مميت، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا شفيق، تعاليت يا رفيق، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا أنيس، تعاليت يا مؤنس، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا جليل، تعاليت يا جميل، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا خبير، تعاليت يا بصير، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا حفي، تعاليت يا ملي، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا معبود، تعاليت يا موجود، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا غفار، تعاليت يا قهار، أجرنا من النار يا مجير. سبحانك يا مذكور تعاليت يا مشكور أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا جواد تعاليت يا معاذ أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا جمال تعاليت يا جلال أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا سابق تعاليت يا رازق أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا صادق تعاليت يا فالق أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا سميع تعاليت يا صريع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا رفيع تعاليت يا بديع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا فعال تعاليت يا متعال أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا قاضي تعاليت يا راضي أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا قاهر تعاليت يا طاهر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا عالم تعاليت يا حكم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا دائم تعاليت يا قائم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا عاصم تعاليت يا قاسم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا غني تعاليت يا مغني أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا وفي تعاليت يا قوي أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا كافي تعاليت يا شافي أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مقدم تعاليت يا مؤخر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا أول تعاليت يا آخر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ظاهر تعاليت يا باطن أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا رجاء تعاليت يا مرتجى أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ذا المن تعاليت يا ذا الطول أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا حي تعاليت يا قيوم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا واحد تعاليت يا أحد أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا سيد تعاليت يا صمد أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا قدير تعاليت يا كبير أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا والي تعاليت يا عالي أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا علي تعاليت يا أعلى أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ولي تعاليت يا مولى أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ذارئ تعاليت يا بارئ أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا خافض تعاليت يا رافع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مقسط تعاليت يا جامع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا معز تعاليت يا مذل أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا حافظ تعاليت يا حفيظ أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا قادر تعاليت يا مقتدر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا عليم تعاليت يا حليم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا حكم تعاليت يا حكيم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا معطي تعاليت يا مانع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ضار تعاليت يا نافع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مجيب تعاليت يا حسيب أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا عادل تعاليت يا فاصل أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا لطيف تعاليت يا شريف أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا رب تعاليت يا حق أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ماجد تعاليت يا واحد أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا عفو تعاليت يا منتقم أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا واسع تعاليت يا موسع أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا رؤوف تعاليت يا عطوف أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا فرد تعاليت يا وتر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مقيت تعاليت يا محيط أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا وكيل تعاليت يا عدل أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مبين تعاليت يا متين أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا بر تعاليت يا ودود أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا رشيد تعاليت يا مرشد أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا نور تعاليت يا منور أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا نصير تعاليت يا ناصر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا صبور تعاليت يا صابر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا محصي تعاليت يا منشئ أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا سبحان تعاليت يا ديان أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا مغيث تعاليت يا غياث أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا فاطر تعاليت يا حاضر أجرنا من النار يا مجير سبحانك يا ذا العز والجمال تباركت يا ذا الجبروت والجلال سبحانك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم وكذلك ننجي المؤمنين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Can we all recite 5 times Amma Eugene for other who meaning do more than us? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف ما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ما يجيب إذا دعاه ويكشف. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى Let's please welcome Sayyid Karmani with a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الدين عند الله الإسلام صدق الله العلي العظيم زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman here in Allentown or across the globe, wherever you may be hearing my voice, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question, what is karam? We're told there's a moment in the Holy Quran where God tells Moses, go and find someone who's more knowledgeable than you. As you know, Moses or Musa is the most mentioned prophet in the Quran. That is more than our own prophet Musa is mentioned, more than other prophets Musa is mentioned. So Allah mentions him. But then he's reached a status, a position of a great height. And what this tells us that there's some wisdom therein. Now imagine, Allah has ulul azm prophets, right? There's different rankings amongst the prophets. And Musa is right up there. There's the likes of Musa. There's the likes of course, Isa, Jesus. So there's Moses, there's Jesus, and of course there's our prophet. So there's these hierarchies. So Musa has made it in some sense. But eventually, even when he feels that he may have made it, God says to him, oh Musa, Moses, go and seek out someone where the two rivers meet, someone who has more knowledge than you. Now look, this is somebody who's at the top. And still God is telling him, Allah is telling him, there's someone who knows more than you. And so what this tells us about, and what this reminds us, is that look, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ, above every knower is someone who knows more. But also, one other aspect of this is that the journey is never complete. The journey is never over. As soon as I think I've made it, I need to think again. I need to guess again. That I need to go, there's something I'm not aware of. So then he goes and he seeks out this place where the two rivers meet, and eventually he meets, it's not mentioned, the name isn't mentioned in the Quran, but in the hadith it is Khidr alayhi salam. And Khidr tells him about the different journeys. And so they go on a journey, and the first stage, Musa says, take me as your student. Let me learn with you. Let me go with you on this journey. And he said, and there's a valuable lesson here. He says, you can come on this journey with me, but look, you won't have patience. Interesting. He's telling him, a ghayr ma'soom is telling a ma'soom about ilmul ghayb. He's telling him what's going to happen in the future. And exactly like that happens, not once, not twice, 3 times. He said, you won't have patience. Nonetheless, he accepts and lets him to go on this journey with him. So when they go on the journey, eventually a moment comes where Khidr, now this is a prophet, Moses is a prophet, of course. Khidr is someone who's been given wisdom, not necessarily of that stature of Musa. Now look, they get to a point in time where they see some boats. When they see these boats, Khidr begins to drill some holes in perfectly good boats. And now you imagine Moses, who's been fighting his whole life for justice, for fairness, for equality, he starts to get upset. He said, what are you doing here? It's a perfectly good boat. Why are you doing this? He said, didn't I tell you you want to have patience? And then they go on. He said, okay, sorry. I said, you're right. Okay. So they go to the next journey eventually, as you know. And eventually, long story short, he ends up taking the life of a Young man, Khidr does. There's a long story about the background of that, but it ends up happening, right? And Musa gets more upset. He said, what's going on here? As the Quran says, as you know, anyone who takes one innocent life, it's as if they take all of humanity. He said, he's not tolerating this, right? There's a backstory. Maybe we'll leave it for another time. Third aspect, they see a wall. And this town, the people of this town, when they get to this town, people weren't the nicest people. But eventually what happens is Moses comes forward and he notices that Khidr corrects the wall. And again he objects. And this is the third time that objection happens. And Khidr says, look, didn't I tell you in our patience? هَذَا فِرَاقٌ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is where you go your way, I go my way. But I'm going to explain to you. And he goes through all the explanations. As you know, in the case of the boat, he explains that there's a ruler, a tyrant, who's stealing people's perfectly good boats. So I put this hole so that the boat would seem like it needs maintenance, it's problematic, so the people would leave the boat. But the owner of the boat could patch it up. And of course, he gives explanations for all of them. I don't want to open the second one because that's 2 lectures or 3 in itself, but there's answers that our scholars have given. The third element of the equation has to do with this aspect of this belonged to property of orphans. There were 2 orphans whose property was under the wall. Now, scholars dispute whether it was material wealth or was it knowledge. Both of them are extremely valuable, but knowledge is superior. Anyways, he said, I corrected this wall because there was this property that belonged to orphans and people were going to take advantage of it, so I did that. So he didn't know the reason. So when things become apparent, you may realize that there are things that you're not aware of. You know, Zurara was a companion during the time of our 4th, 5th, and 6th Imam. Zurara was a companion who eventually, even the Imam said a public statement against him. Imagine this person struggling and fighting for the way of the Imam, and the Imam gives a public statement against him. And then afterwards, Zurara's son comes to the 6th Imam and says, Yabna Rasulillah, can you please tell me something? Until this day, many Muslims in the broader community, they say, you followers of Ahlul Bayt, you respect Zurara, but Zurara is the one who even your own Imam spoke against him. And so Zurara's son came, he said, Yabna Rasulullah, look, we're willing to take any arrows for you. We know you're on the path of truth, but just tell me one thing, which is this. Was my dad on the truth or not? Was my father on the truth or not? Because people say this and people say that. I just want to know what you say. We've heard statements. What is the reality? He said, may God bless your father. He said, we did for your father what Musa and Khidr did with the boats. So what do you mean? He said, you know, when Khidr drilled the holes in the perfectly good boat, he was protecting the boats for the owners of the boats. We made a public statement against your father because if the rulers of the time knew that you were with us, they would have taken his life. So we had that vision, the strategy to look forward, to say that publicly people may say that we're disconnected, but privately we're together. Sometimes we don't see this message. So now coming to the next level, this was one story of one person who is a knower above another knower. And sometimes we don't see the whole picture. So now come with me to another moment. The other moment is in the city of Medina, and it is a moment in time where the Ahlul Bayt are there. And in this era and this time where the Ahlul Bayt are there are movements for us to recognize, for us to realize, for us to consider. The news reaches the ear of the Prophet. They say that eventually his daughter has given birth to a child. When his daughter has given birth to a child, the conversation ensues between Imam Hassan, between Bibi Fatima and Imam Ali about naming the child. And Bibi Fatima says, I will not proceed to name the child before you, Ya Ali al-Murtada. And Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I will not proceed to name the child until Rasulullah names the child. The Prophet enters in and to the gathering and he hears the joy of this child. And he says that I will not proceed to name the child until Jibreel descends. And the narrations say that Jibreel descended and said, Ya Rasulullah, Allah has decreed that this child's name is Hassan. Hassan, the child of Ali and Fatima. Hassan comes as the tafsir of Surah Kawthar. Surah Kawthar, where the Bedouin Arabs used to mock Rasulullah and they used to say that this Rasul is abtar. Not my words, tafsir of Surah Kawthar. As bin Wa'il. You know Amr ibn As, his father. His father is in the vicinity of the mosque, and eventually he's having a conversation with Rasulullah. Rasulullah has just finished his prayer in the early days of Islam. And he's having a conversation. Now, the Quraysh are looking from a distance that why is As bin Wa'il talking to Muhammad? Because they had a problem with Muhammad, of course, right? And As bin Wa'il, they thought was on their side. So eventually, when Rasulullah goes his way, As goes his way, they say, As, come here, come here. So As come, and they say, who are you just talking to? They knew who he was talking to, but they were trying to figure out, what side is he on? And so As says, oh, that one. I was just talking to the one who was Abtar. Abtar comes from a tailless animal. An animal that does not have a tail. Meaning, he has no son who will carry on his message. His message will die out. He laughed, the Quraysh laughed, but Allah didn't laugh. If you understand the Quran, you understand that there's a moment in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says something. When Rasulullah goes on Mi'raj, He says a metaphor. And this is why it's so important to understand this. He says, قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ أَوْ أَدْنَى, that he came closer and closer to the proximity of Allah up until he was 2 bows or less distance from Allah. What does it mean? Allah has no zaman or makan. Allah does not have time and space. Allah is not something that you can measure how far He is. He's above time and space. What is meant by this? One scholar explained this. You know who his name was? His name was Ar-Radhi. Ar-Radhi is Sahib al-Tafsir al-Kabir. You know, our scholars have had respect. Our scholars, and vice versa, real scholars have respect for scholarship. There have been times where scholars of, for example, Ahl Sunnah respect scholars of Shia, and Shia scholars respect Ahl Sunnah. Example, Ibn Abyssina or Ibn Sina was an Ismaili Shia, right? Khwaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi. If you ask ulama, they say, the Sunni brothers, they say, if there was one scholar that we wish was from Ahl Sunnah, they 2 names come up. Either Khwaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi, who was the greatest scientist, mathematician, and Islamic scholar of his time, student of Allama Hilli, or they say Abyssina or Ibn Sina. But there are some scholars who, our scholars say, if you put all of the ulama of Ahl Sunnah on one side, and you put these scholars on the other side, these scholars will be heavier in knowledge. For example, Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani, who's one of our scholars of top caliber. He's the oldest and the most reputed scholar in Qom, and he's the head of the Hawza Ilmiya of Qom. In fact, he's one of the students of Sayyid Khouy. And he said, if you put all of the scholars of our brothers in Ahl Sunnah on one side, and you put just one scholar on the other side, who's from Ahl Sunnah, his name is Ar-Radhi, who wrote the Tafsir al-Kabir. He said the knowledge of Ar-Radhi will be greater. So he has a tremendous amount of respect of him. So Ar-Radhi said that why was this isti'ara used of 2 bows or less? What does it mean? He says, هذا برد على استعمال العرب وعرضهم. This term was used because of the culture and the society of the Arabs at that time. That whenever 2 individuals who were tribe leaders wanted to come together, they would give a symbolic gesture. What was the symbolic gesture? They would take 2 bows, put them together, and they would take 1 arrow, and they would fire it in the distance. And the symbolism was that your peace is my peace, your war is my war. So Ar-Radhi said that it was as if Allah was saying that Muhammad, your peace is my peace, your war is my war. That whoever comes after you comes after me. So when this As bin Wa'il made fun of Rasulullah by calling him Abtar, they laughed, As laughed, but Allah didn't laugh. Allah made sure that the tafsir of Surah Kawthar came true in the line through Hasan al-Mujtaba. The tafsir of Kawthar is Hasan al-Mujtaba. So now come to this moment in time. A few things that I want to mention about Imam Hassan very quickly tonight is his aspect of what we learn from his life. What does the Quran say about this individual? What does Islam say about this individual? What does Rasulullah say about this individual? What are some of the traits that Hasan al-Mujtaba had that we can learn from and implement in our lives? The 5th element, what was the courage of Hasan al-Mujtaba? And how strategically forward was he? The 6th element and the final element is, how is it that we learn from the life of Imam Hassan how to know when to fight and when to use the pen and when to use the sword, when to lay the groundwork of strategy so that we know what the future of our community is, our society is, and how did he show us how to live and breathe Kamal on a day-to-day basis. This is our agenda for the next few moments that we're together. Wherever you are, here or across the globe, send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, it's a bittersweet moment. This is my last lecture here tonight. Inshallah, life permitting, I'll be back with you at some point in time. I'm heading to the Big Apple from here, but you guys will always have a place in my heart. But I want us to understand that we just started a conversation on Kamal. There's no way we can perfect it. It's a lifelong journey. And that's why I give the example of golf. You can learn, it's a game you can never perfect, but you're always learning. There's other examples of this. You remember mathematics in math class? There used to be something called limits, asymptotes, that you can get close through the line, but you can't touch it. It's the same concept with kamal. You're trying and you're striving and you're getting closer and closer, but it's a limit. It's something that you'll never get to. True insani kamil is Rasulullah. True insani kamil is Ali al-Murtada. True insani kamil is the likes of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. We can't get there, but we can at least strive, right? We can try to get in the neighborhood of Salman. Salman is too high. We can try to get in the neighborhood of Abu Dhar, right? Too high. Maybe we can try to get in the neighborhood of Ambar or someone like that. But the pursuit is what's the most important thing. And the same way that, in stocks, graphs of stocks don't always go up linearly, right? Sometimes they retract, they go up, they go down. Our spirituality has the same. But the pursuit is the most important. Never give up on that pursuit of trying to become the best version of yourself, the best version of society. So now, when it comes to the titles that the Ahlul Bayt were given, there are different titles that were there. For example, someone is called Alim Ali Muhammad. How is it possible? The scholar of Ali Muhammad. A family in which everyone's a scholar. How is it possible? This was given to the 8th Imam. Imam al-Radha was called Alim Ali Muhammad, for example. Or for example, they typically say the 6th Imam is known as Sadiq Ali Muhammad, right? The honest one. In a family where everyone is honest, everyone's truthful, everyone's trustworthy, everyone's all of these. But they highlighted, they manifested and made it known and made it understandable. Do you know what one of the titles of our second Imam who we're commemorating tonight is? He is known as Kareem al-Ahlul Bayt. He is the one of Karam. Remember the 4 stages that I mentioned to you in terms of generosity to not the opposite of it. That is stinginess. La'im, the base level is la'im. La'im is the person who will go hungry and make sure that everyone else goes hungry. This is a spiritual disease. Then there is one who is bakhil. They will eat themselves, but they don't want anyone else to eat. Then there's another layer, which is sakhi. Sakhi is the person that if they have, they'll eat themselves, but they're not necessarily going to share with other people, or they'll limited share. But one is kareem. Kareem is whether they have or not, no matter what, they'll go hungry, but they'll make sure other people eat. They'll make sure that other people have. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Quran. Those who give in times, in good times and bad times, who give in ease and hardship. يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظ. And they control their anger. This is what Islam is all about. So in this family, in this household, what are the lessons we learn from Imam al-Mujtaba? One is his karam. The other is his strategy. What do I mean? Stay with me here. When it comes to karam and strategy, you need to understand something. Imam understood this. Strategy, you go to Harvard Business School, Wharton, or even the government colleges, that is the Kennedy School of Government, or you go to the politics or business. There's something called strategy. And strategy is very important. Allow me to explain. In military, as well as in business, you need to understand strategy. You have to have a plan of action. So there was a strategist, historically, by the name of Hannibal. You've heard of Hannibal? Hannibal was a great strategist. And he's this general, and on the other side, he has the Roman army against him. He has a much smaller army. And now, the situation is such that he has to figure out, I have a smaller army, and I'm facing this Roman army that has much more power than me, more men than me, more military might than me. How do I win? So he devised a plan through his strategy in order to do something. He said, I know that the Romans, they keep their army in squares. And they put their strongest men at the front, and they put the weakest at the back. So the strongest men come, they destroy you, and then they pierce through your army. They pierce through your army. So then he said, what can I do? So he designed his flank, not in a square, but more like a triangular shape. And so what he did was, he said, I'm going to put my weakest men at the front. And I'm going to put my strongest men on the sides. And so when the battle began, the strongest men from the Roman Empire's army were at the front of the battalion. And the weakest men in Hannibal's army were at the front. And so what happened is, in the beginning, the army of the Romans destroyed Hannibal's first line. They finished all of them. But what they didn't realize is they fell into Hannibal's trap. And Hannibal's trap was that he wanted to get all of the strongest men in the center. And then what he did was, like scissors, he had his strongest men come in and destroy the weakest men within the Roman army. And inside were the strongest men who were rendered useless because they were surrounded by their own men and they couldn't get out. In a matter of 4 to 5 hours, Hannibal destroyed the entire Roman army with superior strategy. I'll give you a business example. You know this guy Bezos? Ever heard of Amazon? So he started a company. He's working at D.E. Shaw in New York City, one of the early hedge funds that was a quantitative hedge fund. And so he sees and he says, this internet that's coming up, it's growing at a pace of 2,000% a month. And so he goes from there and he ships and he goes all the way to Seattle and he starts this company called Amazon, which at the beginning is just selling something called books. And people said, oh, this guy is just a bookseller. What's the big deal? But they didn't understand that he picked books because they have the most number of SKUs, you know, SKUs. And he said, from there, I can pivot to anything. And he became the anything store and the everything store. In the 90s, people say, what is this guy doing? But if you didn't see, he was planning well ahead, and now the company has taken over the world in some sense. Strategy. When it comes to Islam, this Imam that we're here to commemorate tonight was a great strategist, a grand strategist, in fact. And you'll find that when you look at his life, there's many things that we can learn. And in order to understand this, you have to understand what was the common theme that all the Imams had. And the common theme that all the Imams had was Hifzuddin wa Hifzuddima, to preserve the religion and preserve the blood. And that's why at times the movement required the movement of Imam Hussein, and at times it required the movement of Imam al-Hassan. And at times it required the movement of Imam al-Sadiq. Imam al-Sadiq was what? What is Imam al-Sadiq doing? Imam al-Sadiq was using the knowledge, the institution, the university. And at times it required the diplomacy and the knowledge as well as the international relations of the 8th Imam, Imam al-Rida. Because he was having global conversations around knowledge. Anyways, so now come to this. Sometimes people say Imam al-Hassan was not as courageous as Imam Hussein. And this is something that we need to address, number one. Number two, what attributes did this Imam have in terms of his ethics that we can learn from? First of all, didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran, in Surah Dahr, for example, Surah Insan, هَلْ أَتَى عَلَى الْإِنسَانِ حِينٌ مِنَ الدَّهْرِ لَمْ يَكُنْ شَيْئًا مَذْكُورًا? Was there not a time that man, remember, there was the time where you are not worth mentioning, O insan. And Allah created you. But then there's another verse within the same chapter, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَعَسِيرًا. And they give out of their love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the poor, the orphan, the wayfarer. All historians agree that this ayah of the Quran was revealed in honor of the likes of Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Bibi Fatima, and Imam Ali. There's no dispute. All Muslims agree on this. Number one, in the Quran. Now, Rasulullah, again, accepted by all Muslims, no dispute. He said, Al-Hassan wal-Hussein imaman, qama aw qada. Hassan and Hussein are imams, whether they are standing or sitting. There's a symbolism here. That is, whether they go to the battlefield or whether they stay in a peace treaty, in one aspect. Another aspect, he says, for example, Al-Hassan wal-Hussein sayyid shabab ahli al-Jannah, right? Rasulullah said this, everyone accepts. There's no doubt or dispute about this. Al-Hassan wal Hussein are the ones who are the leaders of the people of Jannah, the Ahlul Jannah, right? So now, keeping all of these pieces of the puzzle together, let's come to the next version of this. The grand strategy of Imam Hassan. You know what it is? In his time, we need to reflect on this. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba is in a time where he's dealing with difficulties. And there are things that you need to learn from. And I need to learn from. So for example, when Imam Ali alayhi salam leaves this world, when he's assassinated and he leaves this world, what is the political circumstance that happens? What happens? Is it that Imam Hassan, some people give bay'ah to him, nobody gives bay'ah to him, or is it something totally different? Or do people go after, for example, Muawiyah? Here's the historical pages. And this is what Maududi said, this is what other people who studied this, right? So what did Maududi, again, not Shia, right? And they said, look, who are the people who gave bay'ah? This is what historians said. Basra, Kufa, Hijaz, Makkah and Medina, Yemen, all of these places directly after the death of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the shahadat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they all did bay'ah to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. It was only in Sham, in Levant, that people did bay'ah of Muawiyah. because Muawiyah was controlling that territory. So now here comes the situation. When everyone has done bay'ah of Imam Hassan, that's why ulama and scholars of Muslim repute, they say that the one who did, for example, one of the Khulafa Rashideen, according to the Muslim community, is Imam Hassan. So they say because of this, everyone did bay'ah. Then what happened as a result of this was this. The result ended up happening was Imam Hassan said, look, he writes a letter to Muawiyah. He says, look, it seems that based on what the way you're operating, it seems that you're not giving bay'ah, and you've started giving your own, you've asked for your own allegiance. It seems like you want a conflict. So Imam is not telling him, let's fight. Imam's saying, look, your actions are indicating that we're on the path of a conflict, because everyone's done bay'ah here, and you are declaring your own khilafah in Levant, in Sham, in Damascus. And so eventually, Muawiyah wants to go to the battlefield, and he gets his people riled up. Now this is what people don't mention. People don't mention, they say Imam Hassan went straight to the pen, and he went straight to a peace treaty. This is some injustice that we do with Imam Hassan sometimes, that people do. Imam gathered an army of 50,000 people. He set up 2 camps, one at Maskan, one at Madain. And he set up these 2 camps, and we took them to the battlefield. Allow me to explain. Do you know Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan? If you want to know the courage of Hassan al-Mujtaba, study Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan. The foremost there, in fact, in Siffin, do you know who the commander was? The commander of the army was Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Imam Ali appointed him in that position. And so when it came to the most courageous commander, it was Hassan al-Mujtaba. But sometimes it requires that you have vision, you have strategy, you're looking down the ways. So now what ended up happening was, in Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan, you see the strength of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Muhammad Hanafiya himself says, the adopted son of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says that my father Ali said to go in advance. He said, for a moment, the army, I was hesitant for a moment, and I felt a gust of wind blow past me. He said, I looked back and I looked forward, and what did I notice? He said, I noticed that it was Hassan al-Mujtaba who blew past me, who flew past me. And he went to the other ranks and he was finishing the army left, right, and center. This is the courage that we don't talk about. So now coming back to after Amir al-Mu'mineen, Maskan and Madain, and the post-operation. So what happened was, Imam has got his whole army in his camp, and he's ready to go to war. And he says, look, I'm sending a proxy from here. You know how there's hot wars and cold wars? Cold wars are policy wars. Hot wars are direct wars. And then there's a third type of proxy war, that the 2 powers that are there aren't fighting directly, but they're fighting on some other ground and territory. Right? And this is all in front of you today as well, right? So the same thing was going on then. So at that point in time, the Imam said, I'm sending a battalion of 5,000 towards Sham. Because what happened was that from Sham, Muawiyah had set an army of 30,000 to go towards the Imam's camp. So the Imam sent an army of 5,000 to intercept them. But the Imam knew what was going to happen. He sends a general and he says, look, I'm sending you to go towards Muawiyah's army, but I'm telling you one thing, be faithful, be loyal, do not be treacherous. Why did the Imam say this? Because the Imam knew. He knew something about what his father had dealt with. He knew about what others had dealt with, what people before had dealt. So what happened was, he dispatched this army, and when he dispatched this army, exactly as the Imam anticipated, Muawiyah had bribed the general of Imam Hassan's army. And he bought him out, and he took him over to his side. When the news reached back to Imam Hassan's camp, Imam Hassan said, look, here's the situation. That person, he went and he flipped sides. And I told him not to, he did it. Now here's the situation. Are you all ready to fight or not? I'm ready to fight. Imam Hassan was ready to fight. Hazrat Abbas was ready to fight. Imam Hussein was ready to fight. Everyone's ready to fight. Because it's the defense that matters here, right? He said, you decide amongst yourselves, are you ready or not? I'm ready. But are you going to be faithful or loyal or not? Imam said this and he went back into his camp. He went back into his tent. And when he went back into his tent, his own army began to fight amongst itself. To the extent that the narrations say that one of the men came and he went and he attacked Imam Hassan from his own army. He goes into Imam Hassan's tent and he stabs Imam Hassan in his thigh, his leg. Imam Hussein comes, as the Abbas come, they protect it, they take. So this is the mazlumiyat of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. That when we talk about Imam Hussein alayhi salam had people, although few, but he had loyal comrades. Imam Hassan's followers were not loyal to him. So do you blame Imam Hassan or do you blame others? Further than this, when Imam Hassan understood the circumstance that these people are not willing to be loyal and faithful and willing to fight, so then he picked up the pen. And then he wrote the conditions of the sulh, or the peace treaty. And it's as if he's exposing what's about to happen. And what did he write in those peace treaties? Someone should read these peace treaties that exist. For example, he wrote that, look, here's the situation. After you are not going to pass this khilafah on to anyone else after you. As in, you're not going to pass it on to your son Yazid. It's as if the Imam is looking down the road and knows exactly what's going to happen. He's saying, number one, you're not going to pass this on to anyone else. After you, this khilafah goes back to Ali Muhammad. It goes back to Ahlul Bayt. It goes back to, for example, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. First condition. He says, number two, that cursing that's happening in Damashq, in Levant, for 90 years where Imam Ali has been cursed, you need to stop that cursing. And of course, that cursing never stopped. Number three, you will stop the killing of the followers of Ahlul Bayt. Now, is the Imam asking for anything for himself? So number three, you're going to stop the killing of the innocent. For example, like the likes of Hijr ibn Adi al-Kindi. You remember when ISIS went in and they exhumed his body? These were like loving companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And so these are people facing stiff persecution. He says, and number three, you will give a certain amount of money for those people whose the blood money and the families who have been left as widows and orphans because of all of the followers of Ali that you've killed. And he went, and then he says further something. He said, Muawiyah, your witness will not be accepted in the court of law. Your hukum, for example, your hukum will not be accepted. You cannot do any judgment on behalf of the people. What kind of ruler are you when you're not able to do judgment on this? You know, one of the biggest things in history, and I've talked to my friends who are Muslim about this, you should invite them. Ask them, where did this concept of adalat-e-sahaba come from? This was the biggest lie that was played in the history of Islam. And this is what Iqbal understood, this is what Maududi understood, that there's a concept that was reverse engineered and created in the history of Islam called Adalat-e-Sahaba. And Adalat-e-Sahaba means that all of the Sahaba of Rasulullah were adil. But what's the criteria of Sahaba? You know the three generations of Muslims? These are not my words, these are general Muslims. They say, Sahabi, Tabi'i, Tabi Tabi'i. Sahabi is anyone who saw Rasulullah. MashaAllah. Abu Lahab saw Rasulullah. Abu Jahl saw Rasulullah. So, anyone who saw Rasulullah, Sahabi, MashaAllah, Subhanallah. Tabi'i, anyone who saw not Rasulullah but a Sahabi, second generation. Third generation, Tabi Tabi'i. One who saw not Rasulullah, but not a companion, but they saw a Tabi'i. Adalat-e-Sahaba ruined Islam. Because people began to say, Jamal, on one side is Aisha, on one side is Ali. This is all history. I'm not saying anything out of my pocket. Siffin, Muawiyah and Ali. Both are right, mashallah, subhanallah. Do you know, in our brothers in Ahl Sunnah, I want to say this to you because we sometimes think all Muslims are the same and all Ahl Sunnah are the same. For example, just because someone's Wahhabi doesn't mean that they're also. Do you know, if you go to India, you will find people who are Ahl Sunnah, our brothers, our nafs, you know. Sayyid Sistani has said, Ahl Sunnah are our nafs, not our brothers. More afdal. They're yourselves. You have to have tremendously good relations. But there's something called Tafdhili Sunnis. You know what Tafdhili Sunnis are? And you may find some that are in America in Taqiyya, some scholars who I know, who are Tafdhili Sunnis, who are running Jamaats, and they say that I'm in a Sunni mosque. I'm a Tafdhili Sunni, but I cannot say this publicly because people won't understand. You know what Tafdhili Sunnis are? Those who say that in order of the Khulafa'i Rashidin, Ali ibn Abi Talib is number 4, but in status he is number 1. Why? They said, how is it possible that the person who's most afdal can be number 4? And they say, the response is, the same way Allah sent 124,000 prophets, the last one was the most afdal. It doesn't necessarily mean because someone's first, they're most afdal. Adam is not more afdal than Rasulullah. That's why every Muslim accepts that anyone who came against Ali ibn Abi Talib, they did khata ijtihadi. They made a mistake in terms of their judgment. But Adalat-e-Sahaba was not a part of Islam, it was pierced in much later. Anyways, having said that, why do I say this? So now Imam Hassan exposes Muawiyah. When Muawiyah gets the letter, he takes the letter and he crushes it under his feet. He rips it, crushes it. He shows very clearly that he has no intent to implement what is being said. In fact, you'll find, you want to understand Imam Hassan, understand this dynamic of Imam Hassan, the sulh and the peace treaty of Imam Hassan should not be called Sulh Hassan, it should be called Sulh Hassanain. Of Hassan Hussein. Why? Because when Imam Hassan passed away and left this world, for 10 years, Imam Hussein abided by the principles and the word of the Sulh Hassan. It wasn't until Muawiyah violated and after his death, Yazid took on the mantle, which he was not supposed to, that eventually he came and said that Imam Hussein went to Karbala. All of these principles and all of these concepts are vital to consider. So now, what does it come to? In karam. There's a book I invite you to read. I'm bringing all the dots together. The book is called The Paradox of Generosity. You know what a paradox is? Paradox is something you think is intuitive. It's not intuitive, it's the opposite. And the book said, you want to get something in life? You want to achieve? You want to be knowledgeable? You want to be wealthy? You want to have everything in life? Give. You know, sometimes we think we get richer by accumulating knowledge, accumulating wealth, accumulating. No, the book says that happiness and generosity are tied at the hip. So you know the karama and how Kareem Imam Hassan was? He gave all of his wealth, all of his income. And he was not, low in income. All of it twice. And he gave half of it numerous times, countless times. There's a moment in time where historians say, not my words, that Muawiyah came from Sham. After Sulh Hassan, he came from Sham to Medina. And when he came to Sham, from Sham to Medina, eventually he was giving people a lot of money from the Baytul Mal. The difference in Ahlul Bayt was Ahlul Bayt gave their money from their pockets. And of course, the example that came afterwards, the Ahlul Bayt gave from pockets, but Banu Umayyah gave from the people's public treasury, the people's money. So eventually Muawiyah is setting up camp in Medina and he's giving money to this person and that person and this person and that person. And eventually he says, where's Hassan al-Mujtaba? Say, Hassan al-Mujtaba, the response Muawiyah gets is, Hassan al-Mujtaba only comes to read namaz in the masjid and he goes home and he runs his dastakhan and he helps people. He's not going to come meet you. He said, okay. Well, when he comes to the masjid and he's on his way out, direct him towards me and I'll interact with him then. So then when Imam Hassan finishes the salah, right? This is the same Imam Hassan who teaches us some valuable lessons, right? There's a moment in time, i'tiqaf is coming up at the end of the month, for example. We in Islam, or we just follow the Ahlul Bayt, we do also have i'tiqaf in a masjid, for example. There's a moment where Imam Hassan is in i'tiqaf. When he's in i'tiqaf, the narration says that a man comes to Imam Hassan and he says, Yabna Rasulillah, I'm in heavy debt, I'm in a heavy burden, I owe a lot of money to people. But they've called in their debt. They've called in their money. Like in Wall Street, the margin calls. He's called in the debt. And so eventually, the people are saying, Imam Hassan's in i'tiqaf. You don't see he's in i'tiqaf. He can't leave the masjid. Why are you troubling him? The Imam said, look, I don't have the money on me right now. It's not like liquid assets today, right? You just go to the bank and remove it. You have real estate, other property, and other things. You have to make arrangements for the money. So what happens is, he says, I don't have the money on me at this moment. Please forgive me. The man said, look, Ibn Rasulullah, I know you don't have the money on you right now, I understand. But your word is so valuable that at least if you say something, he will extend my deadline. He'll give me some more time to pay. And the people are saying, you don't see Imam Hassan is in i'tiqaf, why are you troubling him? He says, Imam Hassan says, as soon as he says that line, can you just talk to him so I can get an extension? Imam Hassan gets up and he goes towards the entrance and towards his shoes. They say, Yabna Rasulullah, you are leaving the masjid in a state of i'tiqaf? He picks up his shoes and he says that I have heard from my father who heard from my grandfather Rasulullah that the one who helps a person in need does better than 1,000 nights of i'tiqaf. This is Islam. This is the essence of Islam. So this same Imam Hassan is leaving the masjid during the time of Muawiyah, he's directed and he says, who is that? They say, that's Hassan al-Mujtaba. He's leaving the masjid to go home. Muawiyah says, up until the morning, up until this time, all the money that you've given to the people of Medina, put it on one side and took all of that money and put it on the other side of the scale and give the same amount or more to Hassan al-Mujtaba. And so he took all of this wealth and Imam Hassan is just standing there watching this and he takes all of this wealth and they say, Imam Hassan, this is for you. And then he says a line, Muawiyah says, and know that I am the son of Hind. In Ziyarat we say, Yabna Akilat al-Akbad. This, when in the battle of Uhud, when Hind chewed the liver of Hamza, this really hurt Rasulullah. People sometimes ask, why do we followers of Ahlul Bayt cry for Imam Hussein, One should ask, why did Rasulullah cry when Hamza was killed? In fact, Rasulullah didn't just cry when Hamza was killed. He told the women of Medina, why are you not crying for my uncle Hamza? He asked them to cry. It's a sign of life, not death. But these things have been withheld. Anyways, that line used to hurt Hind. That chewing of the liver really hurt Rasulullah. So Muawiyah said, I know that I am the son of Hind. At that same moment in time, a man came to Imam Hassan. Everyone knew that Imam Hassan, there was a time where he would leave the masjid. So a man came, he said, Yabna Rasulullah, I've done an oath. He said, what's the oath? He said, the oath is that if my dua is accepted, I will make some shoes, like moccasins, like slipper type shoes. I will make them for you and I will put them on your feet myself. My dua has been accepted. My hajat has been accepted. You know, we've forgotten these things. If you read the books of our brothers in Islam, tawassul, we forgot. You know, tawassul was a commonality amongst Muslims. Read Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Sunan Abi Dawood, Nasa'i, Muslim, the 6 books of our brothers in Islam. There's a moment where in Medina there was no rain. No rain. Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa, he said, today I am going to do dua through the tawassul of Abbas, the uncle of Rasulullah. Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. Nobody said, that's kufr, that's shirk, that's this, that, and the other. Huh? People forget. So on this basis, when this man came with another, he said that, Yabna Rasulullah, I made this prayer, I made this dua, that if Allah accepts this as a gift to Allah, I will serve His Prophet's children. And I will do this. He said, my dua was accepted. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I have said that I will put these feet. The Imam said, you can leave it here, I'll wear it. He says, no, I have promised that I will put these on your feet myself. And so he, out of that adab and ihtiram and respect, he puts it on the feet of Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan says, you see all that wealth, that pile that Muawiyah had just put up? He said, every last dime of that money, that is for you, the person who put the shoes on the feet of Imam Hassan. And he looked towards Muawiyah and he said, know that I am the son of Fatima al-Zahra. And he left. Sallu ala Muhammad. You cannot beat the karam of Hassan al-Mujtaba. There's a moment in time, there's so much to say, but know that this Imam is someone who allowed us to be Shias today. Had he not had the vision and strategy that he had, perhaps we wouldn't be here today. The lifeblood in the heart of Rasulullah, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. In fact, in battle, when Imam Hassan blew past Muhammad Hanafiya, he said, this is the difference. Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, Imam Ali never treated them like his own children. He said, these are the children of Rasulullah. My children are separate. Although biologically, of course, they were his children. But what he's saying is, there's a maqam of Rasulullah. And Allah willed that the lineage of Rasulullah continues through these individuals. Not my words, accepted by all Muslims. Now comes the essence of what I wanted to bring together. The karam of Hassan al-Mujtaba. And this whole family's karam is so valuable. Their knowledge. So I talked about his courage, his sakhawat, his generosity, his karam, and also his knowledge. What about this knowledge? You want to know about this knowledge? There's a moment in time, Rasulullah is in the masjid. When Rasulullah is in the masjid, he's with his companions, he's explaining some ahkam to them. When he's explaining some ahkam to them, an elderly man comes into the masjid. And when he comes to the masjid, Rasulullah is speaking to his companions. When he's speaking to his companions, this elderly man says, Ya Rasulullah, I have some questions. Can you please help? At that point, the narration say, Imam Hassan was a young boy who was in the masjid in the corner. Rasulullah says, oh man, my grandson Hassan al-Mujtaba will answer your questions for you. Don't worry. Go there and speak to him. Now when this elderly man, as you know, they would call older men, they still do sheikh. Sheikh is someone who's lived long but also knowledgeable. They've seen wisdom. They've seen the world, right? So eventually what happens is, the companions are talking to Rasulullah, but you know, sometimes you're talking to someone and then you're looking around the other eye and you're getting nervous, like, what's going on over there? So they're like, this big sheikh came and Rasulullah is telling my son, Hassan, who's my grandson, to answer his question. So they're starting to sweat. Rasulullah is calm, but they're sweating. They're like, Ya Allah, Ya Rasulullah, what's going on? So Rasulullah is calm, cool, collected. So eventually, the elderly man gets up and he comes back to Rasulullah. Rasulullah said, did you get your answer? He said, yes. Are you satisfied? He said, yes. Alhamdulillah, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam, fi amanillah. He goes. The companions are still sweating bullets. And they say, Ya Rasulullah, can you please explain? This elder man came, we've never seen him before. He's an alim, a sheikh. He looks like a man of wisdom, of hikmah, of knowledge, of wisdom, of all of these things. And you gave him to your son Hassan to answer the question. And then he left satisfied with the answers. What happened? Who was this man? He said, this man was Khidr, alayhi salam. The moment and the time Allah sends Musa to go find someone more knowledgeable than him, He sends him to Khidr. When Khidr needs answers to his question, he comes to Hassan al-Mujtaba. The notion, the principles. Rasulullah himself said, Hassan does the muta'ali abdullah in the sky. That is, he's able to read the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is to understand there's a spiritual dimensions of these personalities. I'm concluding here, but understand Kamal through Imam Hassan. Imam Hassan used to wear very good clothes, very nice clothes. And they used to say, why do you wear such nice clothes? He would say, Inna Allah jameel yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful, He loves beauty. So sometimes the Ahlul Bayt showed that Allah wants that we be in a state of humbleness, of simplicity. But at times Allah says through His representatives that maybe there's a time where good clothes. In fact, one of the things, if Allah has given you to act like a poverty-stricken person, is not good in Islam. If Allah has given you blessings, you're supposed to wear to that level. Not exorbitant, but within that. There came a moment in time where a man comes to the dastakhan of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. You know, Imam Hassan, till this day, people feed in the name of Imam Hassan in Medina. There are families who feed in the name of Imam Hassan, because every day, 365, Imam Hassan used to feed people. And so what happened was, this man, Imam Hassan, noticed, you know, he was very, very, very generous, very, very hospitable, very caring. So this man, he noticed that one man, he was taking some food, he would take one bite, he would take one piece of bread, and he would put one in his pocket. He would eat some, put it in the pocket. Take one bite in pocket, one bite he would eat. So the Imam noticed this, and he said, look, if you have loved ones, if you're taking this for someone, if you are taking this food for your family, your wife, your children, anyone, we will give you to go, to pack, to go. You can take it home, no problem. Eat your fill, be comfortable, be at ease. And the man looked back, and he said, I'm not taking this from my family. He said, then for who? He said, I just came, the address, I got this address from somewhere else. And I went to the table and I sat with a man who, he smelled like you. He walked and talked like you. And he had your grace. But what he was eating was dry barley bread, and he was drinking hot water. And he said, this is not the place for you. Go to this address, go to Hassan al-Mujtaba, and go to his dastakhan. Imam Hassan says, can you describe that person to me more? He said, he smelled like you. He talked like you. He had your ethics, but he was a bit older. He said, oh man. He said, that's a poverty-stricken person of Medina. He said, oh man, that is not a poverty-stricken person of Medina. That is Amir al-Mu'mineen. That is Asadullah al-Ghalib. That is my father, Ali ibn Abi Talib. That he does not wish. You know what Ayatul Wahid al-Khurasani said? That Imam Ali was ruling over a dominion of over 50 countries of today. And you know, he said he used to only open his fast with dry bread and hot water. Hot water. And he would never want more than two things on the table, huh? And by the way, salt was one of the two. And they asked him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why do you do this? He says, I have an arzu, I have a wish. One wish is that I meet my Lord in a state where my stomach is empty. You know, we have our hajat, what's the hajat of Amir al-Mu'mineen? He says, number two, in my entire dominion of over 50 countries of the modern world, I'm saying, he says, I do not wish that there is a single dastakhan, there's a single table that can say to Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah that Ali ate better than us. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is Asadullah al-Ghalib. So the Imam Hassan says, that is his test. That is my father. But for you as followers and believers, we open our doors for you. Understand this concept of what it means to be Hassan al-Mujtaba. I'm putting all of this together. Kamal is in this pursuit. Sometimes it's giving. Sometimes it's getting out of your way. Sometimes it's understanding what it is. Learn from Imam Hassan. Learn from Imam Hussein. Learn what it means to truly be a follower of this path. It's the most valuable thing that Allah has given us. Some have requested that I complete, it's my final night here, and recite some poetry in honor of the Ahlul Bayt that illuminates the heart. What do you do and what do you say and where do you begin? With Imam Hassan, with Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. There's such depth within it. Oh, the poet says, Ye kaun amno ama ka liye payam aaya. Ye kaun amno ama ka liye payam aaya. Meri zuban pe ye besakhta kalam aaya. और महे सियाम में रूहे नुजूल की तरतीब महे सियाम में रूहे नुजूल की तरतीब किताब बाद में पहले मेरा इमाम आया. The poet is saying that in the tartib, in the order of revelation, Allah kept that the book of Allah in Laylatul Qadr comes later, but Hassan al-Mujtaba comes on the 15th first. That is Quran al-Natiq and Quran al-Samit. The understanding of one speaking, one silent Quran. And they are reflections of one another. This is Hassan al-Mujtaba. And the poet considered, wherever is the zikr of Hassan, there has to be the zikr of Hussein. They're one of the same, as Rasulullah himself says. कि हसन के बाद जमी पर हुसैन आते हैं, हसन के बाद जमी पर हुसैन आते हैं, और कसीर होती है कौसर हुसैन आते हैं. Hassan and Hussein are coming. That Kawthar, that promise that Allah made to Rasulullah is coming fulfilled. That from the corners of the world, you'll find our brothers in Islam in Morocco. Morocco, Sadat from the line of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. They're not even Shia, many of them. Many of them are becoming Shia now because they're seeing the history unravel. In the Arab belts, you'll find. You'll find in Jordan, Sadat. You go to every corner of the world, there's the lineage of Rasulullah. Because Allah's promise will always come true. Allah's will always come true. Where there is Hassan and Hussein, they're coming from the line of Ali al-Murtada. They're coming from the line of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Final few lines of poetry and I'll conclude here. They ask, where is Ali in the Quran? Where is Hassan in the Quran? Where is Hussein in the Quran? Our brothers in Islam say at a minimum 300 verses, 300 ayat of the Quran out of 6,000 are in honor of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Some scholars have said up to 1,000 in the tafsir or ta'wil. There's tafsir and ta'wil, right? Tafsir is zahir, ta'wil is deeper inner meanings. Ali ibn Abi Talib is at every moment there in the Quran, in very moments. The poet says, Quran mein agar zikr Ali ka nahi dekha, Quran mein agar zikr Ali ka nahi dekha, Makkah to gaye khana-e Kaaba nahi dekha. Allahu Akbar. He says if you didn't see Ali in the Quran, it's as if you went to Makkah and you didn't see the Khana Kaaba. Baba, what did you go to Makkah for? You went for the casino? What did you go for there? You go for the clock tower? What did you go there for? He says Ali ibn Abi Talib is at every moment in the Quran. Quran mein agar zikr Ali ka nahi dekha, Makkah to gaye khana-e Kaaba nahi dekha. और एक जिक्र अली का है और एक तेज अली की, एक जिक्र अली का है और एक तेज अली की, इन दोनों से छुप जाए जो शजरा नहीं देखा, इन दोनों से छुप जाए जो शजरा नहीं देखा. और एक शोर बहुत कब्र अंधेरी का सुना था. You know why we recite all these du'as, for example, in these nights? It's a friend in the grave. एक शोर बहुत कब्र अंधेरी का सुना था, हमने तो कहीं कोई अंधेरा नहीं देखा, हमने तो कहीं कोई अंधेरा नहीं देखा. और वो मुझको नजफ जाता हुआ देख रही थी, वो मुझको नजफ जाता हुआ देख रही थी, जन्नत की तरफ मैंने जरा सा नहीं देखा. वो मुझको नजफ दा. She was watching me. Who? Jannat was watching me going towards Najaf. And I didn't look one iota towards Jannat because my Jannat is Najaf. Not my words, Iqbal. He says, Surma-e aankh, khak-e Madina u Najaf. He says, you want to know what is the beautification of my eyes? It is the dust of Medina and Najaf. This is the understanding of what Ahlul Bayt are. In terms of understanding Quran and Natiq, and Quran is Samit. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to learn from the lives of Rasulullah, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow them to become the best versions of themselves and the best community and help become a role model for other communities to follow. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. It's my final night here. I wanted to thank you all for your hospitality, generosity, kindness. It's a second home. The MC has been excellent with me here, the management committee and the team. Your hospitality is, and you all have a place in my heart. Please keep me and my family in your du'as, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future. A final request, if you can please recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for your marhameen, for our marhameen, for the sponsors' marhameen, and for all those who do not have someone to recite Al-Fatiha for them this night. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat. Alhamdulillah, it's the Jashin and the birthday of Imam Hassan. Alhamdulillah, we have two birthdays at least that I'm aware of. One, our brother Mujtaba's Islamic birthday, and one sister here, her birthday. Please do wish them a very happy birthday when you meet them, inshallah. And may the barakah of Imam Hassan and Mujtaba come in all of your lives, day in and day out. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
برحمة آل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على بارد النار صلوات اللهم صل على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين برعاية سيدي مولاي علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام صلوات اللهم صل تمام مومنین کو اور مومنات کو میں ولادت امام حسن مشتبہ کی بہت بہت مبارکبادی پیش کرتا ہوں اور ساتھ میں رمضان کی بھی بہت بہت مبارکباد اور میں تہ دل سے شکریہ ادا کروں گا امین بھائی کا غلام بھائی کا کہ اس ناچیز انسان کو یہاں بلایا. نور علی کا کیا حال ہے؟ خیریت سے آپ سلامت رہیں. بارد نعرہ صلوات. بہت عظیم شخصیت ہیں دارالسلام میں ماشاءاللہ ان کی بہت خدمات ہے. سلامت رہیں. ان کی صحت و سلامتی کے لیے بعض بلند نعرہ صلوات اللہم صلی. اچھا 4 مصرع پیش کر رہا ہوں. اس سے پہلے صداؤں میں شامل ہونا میرے ساتھ. نعرہ تکبیر، نعرہ رسالت، نعرہ حیدری، حیدری، نعرہ صلوات اللہم. خیر سے حسد رکھ کر خیریت نہیں ہوتی، خیر سے حسد رکھ کر خیریت نہیں ہوتی، دشمنان زہرا کی عافیت نہیں ہوتی، قبر میں ملک مولا قاتلان زہرا سے، قبر میں ملک مولا قاتلان زہرا سے، دشمنان زہرا کی اس طرح کے کاموں میں معذرت نہیں ہوتی، قبر میں ملک مولا قاتلان زہرا سے، اس طرح کے کاموں میں معذرت نہیں ہوتی. برحمت آل محمد صلوات اللہ. اچھا مولا حسن کی شان میں ایک منقبت پیش کر رہا ہوں. بارد نعرہ صلوات. صلح سے رکھ دیا تو نے دین کا بھرم، میرے مولا حسن تیری کیا بات ہے. آپ تمام مومنین اور مومنات کو میرے ساتھ یہ کہنا ہے میرے مولا حسن تیری کیا بات ہے. صحیح ہے. صلح سے رکھ دیا تو نے دین کا بھرم، میرے مولا حسن تیری کیا بات ہے، میرے مولا حسن. شرمائے نہیں، بہت ہے بلند. میرے مولا حسن تا قیامت نہ بھولیں گے تیرا کرم، میرے مولا حسن تیری کیا بات ہے. مفتیوں سے گزارش یہی ہے میری، پہلے تاریخ کو غور سے پڑھ تو لے، دین حق کی بقا ان کا منشور ہے، جنگ سے وہ کرے یا صلح سے کرے، تیری تدبیر سے ہے یہ اونچا علم، میرے مولا حسن تیری کیا بات ہے. میں حسن. ہاں عبادت ہے ذکر امام حسن. جب پلٹ کر کہاں میرے ایمان نے پھر بھی حاضر ہوا منقبت کے لیے. مجھ کو دی ہے صدا میرے وجدان ہے, میرے وجدان نے لگ رہا ہے میرے عرش پر ہے قدم میرے مولا حسن, میرے مولا حسن. صلح سے رکھ دیا تو نے دین کا بھروں میرے مولا حسن, تیری کیا بات ہے. برمت والے محمد صلوات. اچھا ابھی تک یہ لگ رہا ہے کہ آپ لوگ شرما کے میرے ساتھ پڑھ رہے ہیں. آپ اگر جو میرے ساتھ ساتھ میں پڑھیں گے تو ایک ماحول بن جائے گا جشن کا اور ایک لطف بھی آئے گا. بارہ دیگا نعرہ صلوات. اللہ نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے. بہت پرانا کلام آپ نے سنا ہوگا اور شرمائے نہیں, باز بلند میرے ساتھ. نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے کیا کہنے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. خدا کے دی کا نا خدا, خدا کے دی کا نا خدا, ہر ابتدا کی ابتدا کرم کی انتہا حسین ہے. کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. ہے جس کی فکر کربلا حسین وہ دماغ ہے, یہ پنجت کی انجمن کا پانچواں چراغ ہے. حسن کا پہلا ہم سفر, حسن کا پہلا ہم سفر, علی کا دوسرا پسر, امام تیسرا حسین ہے. کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. کرو گے مخالفت غم حسین کی یہاں, وہ حشر ہوگا حشر میں کی الحفیظ و علما. جہاں بھی چھپنے جاؤ گے, جہاں بھی چھپنے جاؤ گے, کہیں بھی بچ نہ پاؤ گے کہ ہر جگہ میرا حسین ہے. نعرہ حیدری. کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. شہید کربلا کا غم جسے بنا گوار ہے, وہ بد عمل ہے بد نسب اسی پہ شمار ہے. ارے دشمن ازا, ارے دشمن ازا, تمہر ذرا لحد میں جا, پتا چلے گا کیا حسین ہے. کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے کہ کیا حسین ہے, کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. کیا حسین ہے, نہ پوچھئے. وہ نور جس کو مشرقین کہتے ہیں، اسی کو نور خدا نور عین کہتے ہیں۔ بکھر گیا جو رہی نور کائنات بنا، سمٹ گیا تو اسی کو حسین کہتے ہیں۔ ہم حسین والے، ماشاءاللہ باز بلند ہیں، ہم حسین والے، ہم حسین، یقیناً یہ ہماری قسمت ہے، یہ ہماری قسمت ہے، ہم حسین والے ہیں، ہم حسین، ماشاءاللہ سبحان اللہ، ہم حسین، ہم نبی کے عاشق ہیں، ہم علی کے دیوانے، ہم نبی کے عاشق ہیں، ہم علی کے دیوانے، اور حسن سے نسبت ہے، ماشاءاللہ ہم حسین ہیں، ہم حسین ہے، ہم بتاتے دنیا کو ہم سے پوچھتی دنیا، ہم بتاتے دنیا کو ہم سے پوچھتی دنیا، کیا غم میں کتنی لذت ہے، ہم حسین، کیا کہنے سبحان اللہ، ہم حسین والے، یا علی کی مدحت ہے، یا حسین کا ماتم، یا علی کی مدحت ہے، یا حسین کا ماتم، ہر نفس عبادت ہے، ہم حسین ہیں، ہم حسین ہے، ہم حسین، طور تک گئے موسیٰ اور کربلا تک ہم، طور تک گئے موسیٰ اور کربلا تک ہم، یہ ہماری رفعت ہے، ہم حسین ہیں، ہم حسین، ہم حسین وال۔ اور آئیں آخر میں یہ ایک استغاثہ پیش کر رہا ہوں جو میں نے پچھلے مہینے یہ ریلیز کیا تھا، کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا۔ یہ ایک استغاثہ ہے، تمام مومنین و مومنات سے گزارش کروں گا میرے ساتھ بہت سے بلند، جتنی آپ لوگ کے دل میں آواز ہے اور گردن میں جتنی آواز ہے، میرے ساتھ بہت بلند استغاثے میں یہ شامل ہو جائے۔ بار دیگر نعرہ اس طرح، اللہ کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا، کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا، کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا، کہاں ہو زمان، تان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے زمانے کی ٹھوکر میں آ کے گرا ہوں تجھے آنسوؤں سے یہ خط لکھ رہا ہوں سنو اللہ جل کی صدا دے چکا ہوں سنو اللہ جل کی صدا دے چکا ہوں کرو اب تو مشکل کو آسان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا کہاں ہو زمان ماشاءاللہ مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے تجھے ڈھونڈتے ڈھونڈتے تھک گیا ہوں تجھے ڈھونڈتے ڈھونڈتے تھک گیا ہوں بقیا کی گردے سفر میں اٹا ہوں نجف سے بھی قریب بلا تک چلا ہوں نجف سے بھی قریب بلا تک چلا ہوں میں دیوانہ عاشق پریشان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سنا ہے تجھے حال غم کی خبر ہے میری گلیوں کوچوں سے تیرا گزر ہے سماعت لگی تیری آواز پہ سماعت لگی تیری آواز پر ہے نہیں ہے مگر تیری پہچان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا یا مہدی جانا یا مہدی جانا کہاں ہو زمانے کے ماشاءاللہ کہاں ہو زمان گزرتا ہے دن ساتیں گنتے گنتے سجایا ہے آنگن کو میں نے لگن سے یقین ہے کسی روز آؤ گے بن کے یقین ہے کسی روز آؤ گے بن کے میرے گھر میں تم خاص مہمان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان ماشاءاللہ کہاں ہو زمان علم تیرے لشکر کے میں نے سیے ہیں سپاہی بھی تیار سب کر دیے ہیں کئی بار بیٹے کے بوسے لیے ہیں کئی بار بیٹے کے بوسے لیے ہیں جسے تجھ پہ ہو نہ ہے قربان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا کہاں ہو زمانے کے سلطان مولا ماشاءاللہ یا مہدی جانا یا مہدی جانا یا مہدی جانا یا مہدی جانا افلح من صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه ما شاء الله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا ودليلا وعينا أرضك توا وتمتع فيها